So, how did it progress from what you were doing in Chicago to ending up in Mexico once again, but in a different situation?
So I had a friend. Her name is Valerie, and she was like a sister to me. She knew that I was always on the streets. She knew I was always homeless. She knew I was always hungry. I was that kid, and she always, I guess you could say, try to help me out in her own way. Yeah, it was delivering drugs or doing criminal activities, but she got me a job, and she's the one that got me the job to go work for a family in Mexico that later progressed into something bigger.
And so you were happy at that opportunity?
I was very much, because I figured that I was gonna be the next El Chapo. Like I was gonna be somebody in life.
Ambitious.
Yeah, I wanted it all.
So what were the opportunities that she brought to the table for you?
I mean, I always tell people I was 16 years old making, 12 grand, 10 grand, 20 here, 30 there. I mean, it changed me. And I thought that I had found the answer to life. Money fixes everything, even my pain. So I started getting deeper into it, and, I started doing my little, just winning people over. I won some of the people over in Mexico, the families, and I started getting more into, working pretty much full time for them and just getting my cut and just staying in there. I wanted to learn everything that they were doing, because I wanted to do it, but better.
So how did you end up in the Mexico prison?
I started running cars for a family in Mexico, making sure that the cars were leaving the city, getting to Chicago, getting the tanks off. I guess you could say like a manager, managing everything, the money and stuff like that. And on my last trip, I got caught by the military, and I ended up in prison in Mexico.
What was your first impressions of the prison in Mexico walking in?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was terrified when I walked in. I played it off like I wasn't, but I was truly scared, because it was bad. Those horror stories that you hear about Mexican prisons, they're true. They're true. It's real prison over there. It's not the United States. It's not a 5-star hotel. You don't get 3 meals in a bunk. Doesn't work like that over there.
And you had an altercation just walking in the door, correct?
As soon as I came in, somebody wanted my shoes. That's how it works over there. When the people that are really poor, they wait for all the new guys at the door, and as soon as the new guys come in, they stab them and take their stuff. And that's just how it is over there. It's just survival of the fittest.
So how long were you in that Mexican prison?
I was there for 4 years.
And then they transferred you to?
The American Consul came and they transferred me to El Paso, Texas, La Tuna Federal Prison. That's where Boston George was at. A lot of big, I always tell people I left with a GED in marijuana, and I came out with a PhD in cocaine. I met a lot of people while I was in the feds. I was the youngest kid on the yard. I was 19 years old. And they had a lot of big mafia guys there. This is back in the day when the feds housed a lot of important people, and I just learned. I soaked it in like a sponge, and I met a lot of connections in that prison. I made a lot of connections.
So the lifestyle or the criminal activity did not lessen after prison?
No, it got deeper and darker. By this point in my life, I was completely numb already to everything and anything that had to do with caring or feeling or just anything.
So what exactly happened after that first prison stint?
You know, I got to see, especially in Mexico, I got to see, you know, lynchings, just rapes. It was bad. It was bad. I didn't know how bad it had affected me until I was on the plane with all the Americans that they were transferring. I looked back and I could see it in their faces and their eyes that they were messed up. And, you know, as I sat down in my chair, I kind of said, man, you know, I'm lucky that I was in my prime of violence, because, like, it affected me, but I thought I was okay, you know, because all the other Americans were, like, on medicine, like, their hair was, like, straight, like, coming out of a mental institute, you know? And, I mean, I know it had affected me. I knew I was bad. I just didn't know how bad I was until later in my life.
What was the most horrific thing that you saw while you were there?
Honestly, it was when that pedophile guy came in. The way they beat him. I mean, he was trying to put his hands down on the floor, and all his bones were broken on his hands. So it looked like Jello. I can't even explain it. It didn't even look real. It looked like a cartoon. And the way that they were beating him, and the way they stuck the broom, like, it was, I had never heard a human scream like that. And, you know, I've done damage to people. I've seen people do it. Like, I had never heard a human being cry like that. It really changed me that day.
Did it compare to anything that you saw in American prison?
No. You know, American prison is more like fights, stabbings, you know, stuff like that, you know. And Mexico is like rapes, murders, hangings, lynchings. It was completely different.
And the affiliations that you had, you know, in the streets, they play a role while in prison?
Not in Mexico, only in the United States.
How did that happen? How did that work in the United States?
Well, in the United States, you know, my street gang is pretty much in every federal prison you could think of, or state prison. So Latin Kings are pretty big. So yeah, I mean, you find your way. As soon as you walk in the door, I mean, they tell you where you're gonna sit, where you're going, where's your people. You know, you have to go and check to see where your people's at.
And before we leave the Mexico prison experience, what was one way that you had to adapt quickly? Whether it be, you know, relationship building or mentally, something that you had to change about yourself to survive?
I wouldn't say really changed, because I was already numb. I was already violent. I was already a lot of things that I guess I needed to be while I was there. And if I wouldn't have been those things, I wouldn't have survived. I picked up a really bad drug habit while I was there, and I mean, not even that. That couldn't numb the pain. That couldn't numb the voices. Nothing. I mean, it was there.
Yeah. So then you're in that revolving door of American prison, coming back out, going back in. Do you think there was any type of self-sabotage?
Yeah. There was times that I started to feel that I was better off in there. I felt smart in there. I felt like I was somebody in there. And, you know, I didn't have no education. I didn't have no job skills. I didn't have a lot of things that, like, normal people, I guess, have out here. And I would get frustrated, and, you know, sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I have to believe that I threw the wrench in the machinery to make the machine break and send me back. You know?
How did you spend your time in there? Was it complete? You said in Mexico that you started using things to get high. In American prisons, how did you use your time?
It's very different in American prisons because it's very political. The gangs, it's mandatory to be on the yard. It's mandatory to work out. It's mandatory for everybody to eat together. There's just a lot of things that are mandatory that you can't. You're not gonna do your time peacefully. You're not gonna do your time, on your own. You're gonna have to ride it out with your crew, and if your crew gets into a fight, then you're gonna get into a fight too. So it's pretty much like winging it every day in there, man.